Now, I know what you're probably gonna say. Panda, you look different. And I will say I agree with you. I do look different. The reason is a quite literal diet of budget cuts. But we're not here to talk about budget cuts. We're here to talk about Nintendo. Nintendo is a very good company. You know, besides the odd practice of never giving us the old titles from older consoles, but giving us a tiny fraction of them for a higher price than we could possibly get them if they just released them on the e-store.
What is that? What the f*** is that?
And the teeny tiny issue where they sue anyone they can sense has itched their ass around one of their IPs, but besides that, they're golden. Despite my comments, I do really love Nintendo. My first console as a kid was a Super Nintendo, and I've owned every Nintendo console from that point. Yes, even the Wii U, it wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. That tablet was actually pretty cool.
Nice.
It was underutilized, and they marketed it really badly, and, you know, besides that, it was fine. So Nintendo has a very special place in my heart. They also have a very special place in the gaming industry. They have single-handedly been the company with the most amount of console exclusive titles ever. Only in-house hoes for Nintendo. None of the passed around third-party poo-tang like the competitors love to use. They pride themselves in making console exclusives, especially ones that utilize the special mechanics and gimmicks of their latest console. And while I was playing Donkey Kong Country on my Super Nintendo, a question arose in my mind. What is the worst Nintendo game to ever be released? I went on that quest to figure out what that is, but I had to define a few things. And if you want to help me out with this quest, just poke that sub button right over there and like the video. It helps me out a lot. But let's continue onward with our journey. So I wanted to define the worst game by either the lowest rated game or the worst game in terms of how much money it made. Unfortunately, unlike the movie industry where they announce the budget of a film and how much it made, the game industry doesn't do that, because if it gave too much leverage for the consumer to know exactly how much money they ripped off of people with their predatory practices, they wouldn't be able to get away with making something like Concord, which was hundreds of millions of dollars. Anyways, because of that, I had to go with lowest rated game. I also had to qualify that the game I chose was and always has been a Nintendo exclusive console game, since they have a big enough pool of games since the 80s that until now, I can choose between only Nintendo exclusives. I don't need to go into the third-party games at all. This search started as any other video does. I ripped that shit into Google, and I tried to see what I could find. So I clicked on a page, I looked through their list. The first game I found that was considered the worst of the Nintendo franchise was Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. Now, I realized that a game like this perpetrated people to shell out money for amiibos, which was not a great practice for the Wii U era. But that does not make a game a bad game if we use the standards of what a game is. It's a totally fine game. Look, this game was particularly made for hardcore Animal Crossing fans, and it's a Mario Party knockoff. It's super inoffensive, and it's not like so atrocious that they stop the game on your turn and to remind you to swipe your credit card into the card swipe on the side of your Wii U tablet, so it wasn't that big of a deal. It was just a game with no soul. But it also had a very average score, averaging around 5 out of 10. So the obvious bias of what this article meant by the worst was that they just didn't like cash grab games, which there's plenty of them out there. Buying amiibos was a weird time in the Nintendo saga, but the game itself was a game. You didn't need the amiibos necessarily, but the game was still there. You still got to play with a lot of different characters, and you know, you get to have fun with your friends, so it wasn't that big a deal. I moved down the road to a way better article that gave me some truly amazingly bad games that I'd like to share here. The first one on the list was Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. God, do I hate this game. It's like they tried to do what Jak and Daxter did in Jak 2 and Jak 3 by making them really edgy, but made it furries and dumbed it down as low as it could go. And on this limbo match of shame, we got some of the worst design, gameplay, and story out of the Sonic franchise, which is saying something since Sonic 06 still exists. Whereas Sonic 06 was clearly a tax write-off, Rise of Lyric was actually supposed to be the shift they wanted to push onto new and old fans. Obviously, it didn't work, but fuck, they even made a cartoon for this version of Sonic that had very weird dialogue in it, not really made for kids.
Not another speeding ticket. I'll fight it in court, but I don't think they're gonna accept gotta go fast as a medical condition.
And look where they are now. They're making the movies, which is a way better representation of what people want from Sonic. And looking at the overall score for this game, it's about a low 3 out of 10, which is a very forgiving score for what this game is. But it shows we're on the right track to solve this mystery. So I keep digging deeper. From there, the most significant jump down the list is when I got to Superman 64. Now, for all the millennials out there, this is a game that has been talked online en masse for being one of the worst games ever, so I'm not shocked to find it at all. I mean, look at it. It was on the same console as Diddy Kong Racing, Mario 64, and Super Smash Bros. The only reason this game has been on my radar, it was because I remember the video from the Angry Video Game Nerd and his review of it, so I definitely had some knowledge of this game coming in, but it was bad. Like, holy shit, it is a war crime that this is a game. I know that early gaming could be considered the Wild West, but this was not early gaming. This was 1999, a year after I was gifted to the earth, and around the time the golden age of gaming was starting to happen. Like, this was a child born with a defect, much too great to see the light of day, and the fact that he's still kicking around means his life is just agony. The purpose of this game was to save your friends from a virtual version of Metropolis. Somehow they unintentionally made Superman look like a plastic doll and some of the worst feeling controls known to man. They also just didn't finish the map, and no one can tell me otherwise, because if you look at it, you can clearly tell they finished this game. Like, no way in hell could this game ever be considered finished in any way. And as to be expected, the game averaged about a 1.5 to a 2 out of 10, which I thought was probably as low as it was gonna go. I did not expect any game by Nintendo to be any worse than Superman 64, but just when I thought the journey was over, I found a secret tunnel leading to the bottom of the list, just to Hitler's secret bunker where he was hiding this hideous creature that just I had to weep looking upon it. The worst rated Nintendo game of all time is Dr. Jackal in Mr. Hyde. A abomination of a video game that not only barely makes sense, but half the time feels like it was meant to be a mere concept of what games should never be. This came out in 1988, which means somehow it made it past the video game crash of 1983, and I'm gonna be honest, this shit is so odd that it got released that I just straight up think it's an SCP at this point. Like, I know the 80s was a wild time for video games, but this game was produced by a man in the middle of his death throes before getting sent to super hell. This game, if you want to call it that, is about nothing but wandering the streets and getting your shit pushed in as Dr. Jackal. Like, this man has a cane, and one of the buttons is to swing it, and yet you can do no harm to anybody who's literally trying to fight you. But every man, woman, and child is looking to square up with you like you're P. Diddy who invited them to a party. It's crazy. Fortunately, if you do die as Dr. Jackal, then you get to come back as Mr. Hyde, where you can attack, but only with this really dumb pixel-like thing that flies in the most inconvenient path, and now everybody's monsters instead of people, which is okay. I guess Japan just didn't know what that book was about, but sure. Oh, and you think, well, now that I've died and become Mr. Hyde, at least I can beat the game. Ha! Fuck no. You little bitch, you thought you were allowed to progress in this game? Because if Mr. Hyde makes it to the point that you were traveling, which, mind you, you have to travel in the opposite direction from Mr. Hyde than you do for Dr. Jackal. But if you meet the same distance that Dr. Jackal dies in as Mr. Hyde, you automatically die. Fun, right? Like, what the fuck is this game? Like, if I ever grew up with a kid that was like, oh, do you want to play Dr. Jackal or Mr. Hyde? It's super sick. I wouldn't know what to do. Like, I'd have to slap his mother and burn his house down. It'd be the only way to feel right about the situation. Unsurprisingly, there are so few reviews that were initially released for the game that it went on to finally get into reviewers' hands on a much later date. Now, there's some contention with the different rating systems. Not everybody really chose the same rating system, but if we averaged it out based on everybody's scores, we are probably looking at a 1 out of 10, and it doesn't even deserve that. It is close to a 0.5 out of 10, given how low all the scores were. And personally, I don't give a lick about Game Informer. I think they don't have great opinions, but I can't agree with the fact that they gave it a 5 out of 100. 5 out of 100. Looking for bad games on purpose, though, did really give me appreciation for some of the games that have come out as of late. It also made me realize how bad games are that came out this previous year. You know what I'm talking about. But you tell me down below, what games have you played that you think are the worst? And if you made it this far, go ahead and click on another video, share with your friends, and until next week, I'll be seeing you.